Hello, orchid loving friends. So here is the promised video that has to do with the way that I fertilize my orchids. There's been a lot of content on YouTube lately about this. A lot of the accounts that I follow and that I respect have posted their own videos as well. And one of my subscribers did ask if I would post what I do. So I plan on doing that. I just wanted to really quickly introduce you to my new orchids. I got 5 new orchids. I got 2 Tolumnias because some of the people that I follow on YouTube have them and I think they're just adorable and the flowers are beautiful. So I decided to give it a try. I got another Cattleya. I got a Miltoniopsis. Even though she's difficult, or so I'm told, I thought that my growing conditions might work for her, and I'll tell you why in a moment. And then I also got the coconut orchid. So I guess what we'll do is we'll start with the Tolumnias. So I think that the way that these grow are just beautiful. It's kind of almost like a Vanda with the fan. I know they don't grow like a Vanda and they're not a Vanda, but I just really enjoy the shape of these orchids. This is Tolumnia Jarrick Flyer Cocoa Drop. Took it out of its little container. It was in like a tiny little basket with a little teeny tiny bit of bark. And what I've been doing with this one, because I know that the watering schedule is kind of, it's fussy. In other words, it needs water. It likes water. It likes to stay wet, but it also needs to just very briefly dry out in between watering. So what I've been doing is I've been doing an every other day schedule with these two. This one is the Tolumnia Jarrick Flyer Black Magic, which I've seen someone on YouTube have this one and it's really pretty. This one has a new growth. So that's really exciting. The other one doesn't. This one does. When I bought them, it did say that they are about a year away from flowering. So that's fine. They're just pretty in themselves. So, but like I was saying, I am putting them in water for a day and then taking them out of water for a day and then putting them in water for a day. And as these are the only 2 of my orchids or of my plants in general that need that kind of schedule, it's not that bad. It takes, 2 seconds. I make myself a cup of coffee and as it's brewing, I'm either taking them out of water or putting them in water. So since they are new orchids, they are not in fertilized water. I don't fertilize my new orchids. I wait for about a month for them to acclimate to the water culture before I start putting fertilizer on their roots. And my reasoning for that is they are used to being in bark and they are used to having somewhat of a buffer between them and the fertilizer. And I feel like if you just start fertilizing their roots right away in the water, there is potential there for fertilizer burn. I do need to clean up their foliage a little bit. It looks like they have some type of spray. So I got to take care of that. My next is the Ilaria Tanfoglio, the coconut orchid. I was kind of surprised when I got this one. It was a little sadder than I expected it to be in that it wasn't cheap. It wasn't terribly expensive either, but I did expect, I guess, a little more mature of a plant. And also, I mean, it looks like this plant has been through a bit. This pseudobulb in the back, if you can see that there, has actual chunks taken out of it by, I'm assuming, a slug. It does have like 4 or 5 new growths coming on, so it is healthy, but I guess I just expected something a little bit with just a few more pseudobulbs. I did notice that the person that packed this particular shipment was different than the usual person that packs my shipments, so I don't know if that made a difference. But, I mean, it's cute. It just, I guess I was expecting a slightly larger plant. Came in a rather large pot too, which didn't help with the with the size thing. So we're going to keep our eye on her. I am doing full water culture with the Ilaria, and my reasoning for that is I do know that they are thirsty plants, and I've changed my full water culture. I guess you can't really call it full water culture anymore because they are not in water 7 days a week. They are in water 5 days, and then I'm letting them dry out for 2. And that's this Ilaria, that's my Phalaenopsis, and that's my Vanda as well. Because I feel like my Oncidiums I am keeping in a small amount of water for 7 days. But those other types I am taking out of the water for 2 days just to let their roots dry out a little bit, to see if I can slow down some of the root rot on some of the older roots that are dying anyways. Because I want the plant to be able to push out some new roots before she loses all of her old roots. So you can see that's a new growth right there. So that's pretty advanced. This one is the Cattleya that I got. She has orange flowers, so I'm kind of excited to see what they look like. I think she's a little bit far off from blooming size. I think she needs to be a little bit bigger. The pseudobulbs are pretty small. She has 3 new growths. One of them is pretty advanced. This one has something growing in the middle of her leaf. Now, most of these leaves are just the 1 leaf. There is 1 pseudobulb that has 2 leaves, but it looks like an older pseudobulb. So I don't know if she's attempting a flower sheath or if that's going to be another leaf. I think it's a little too early to tell. It hasn't split on the top, so it's definitely not a leaf yet. At least I can't definitively say that. And then if you look down in here, I don't know if you can really see it. Probably not, but there, you'll have to take my word for it. There's another one of them in there. So we'll see. I didn't expect her to have sheaths. I didn't expect her to flower for a little while. I did go with a smaller pot size. Her roots, like all the Cattleyas I've gotten, are not in great shape, but she is a thirsty lady. I don't have to dump her water at the end of the 2 days for the semi-water culture. She drinks it up. And I couldn't really find something to put her in, so she's in a martini glass. I do want to go to the store perhaps this weekend and just look for something a little more sturdy for her. But this is the only thing that I could find that could fit her roots and her circumference without, I didn't want the vessel that I put her in to come up to here because I just felt like that would be too much humidity when I do water her. I want her to be able to still get a lot of airflow. So that's the deal with her. This is the Miltoniopsis that I got, and she's already starting to open her blooms. I've had her for 3 or 4 days, and her bloom, the reason why I got her was these blooms are gorgeous. They're like a soft butter yellow. They have sparkles in the petals, like this petals sparkle, and then it's got this heavenly red and orange and yellow, and then just a little hint of pink there. So I'm really happy about this one. She has 3 spikes. I did order her in bud, so I was anticipating some buds, but she's got 3. She was a little easier to get out of the moss than some of the other fine-rooted orchids that I've gotten. She still was definitely in a pot for too long. The pot was tiny. She was cramped in there. But her roots seem to be taking off already, and I've only had her for a couple of days. She's getting new roots all over the place. She seems happy. The reason why I feel like I might be able to be successful with Miltoniopsis, even though they're a fussy plant, is that my husband likes our environment to be a little cooler, perhaps, than most people. He has tolerated me rescuing animals and taking up this orchid hobby. So I kind of feel like, you know, his comfort levels as far as temperature are concerned, I'll give it to him. So I think I can successfully grow a cool grower, and I think that I should be fine. So I'm going to try it. I put her the same place where I put my other Oncidiums. She gets Eastern light in the morning, but it is filtered. And she seems to be doing okay. She started popping her blooms as soon as she got here. So we'll see how these other flower spikes do. And that'll kind of tell us how happy she is. Like this one is, it's a little bit farther behind, you know. So if these progress, then she's happy. If they stall, then she might not be happy. But we'll have to see. Only had her for a couple of days. So again, I'll update you on her. Okay, so I guess what we'll do now is we'll go over to this fertilizing conversation. So I was originally using my tap water, and my tap water, I decided to get a TDS, which is total dissolved solids, and a pH meter because I was curious. I was using my tap water. Everything seemed to be fine, but doing some research, I was just wondering and worrying that my levels weren't right and I didn't know. And sure enough, my TDS level is 160, which is not terrible. But my pH was a little high. And orchids, most orchids prefer a more acidic water. Not too acidic, but a little more acidic. 7 is neutral pH. So my pH is a little alkaline, which there's only a few orchids that prefer an alkaline pH. And if the pH is not correct, then some orchids can't absorb the nutrients that you're giving them. So when I got the meters and I saw that this was the case with my tap water, and this is filtered tap water. This is not straight out of my tap. This is, it goes through my filter. So it was taking all the chlorine and all those things out. I decided to switch over to distilled water because distilled water is like a clean palette. Distilled water is pretty much a 0 TDS and it's a 7 on the pH. So it's neutral. But obviously it doesn't have any nutrients in it. So I had 2 types of fertilizer that I've been using on and off. I had an Orchid Better Bloom, which is an 11, 35, 15, which those are the different main nutrients that are in the fertilizer. Let me see. So if you can look here, I'm gonna have to put it down and focus on it. So if you can see here, the nitrogen's the first number, and that was the 11. The potash is the second number, which is 15. And then the other number, oh no, I'm sorry. Phosphate is the second number, which is 35, and potash is 15. So those are the 3 numbers that you see on the front. Those are, you know, the most important numbers to an orchid. But then also they need these other nutrients like magnesium, copper, zinc. All these things are also important to an orchid. So when you're picking out a fertilizer, you want to make sure that they also have these nutrients, not just those 3 main nutrients. So this was one of the fertilizers that I had. And then the other fertilizer that I had was this one, which is a higher nitrogen. The other one was a higher, oh, what did I say that was? Phosphate. I'm sorry, I know you couldn't see that because it was blurry. So this one has a higher nitrogen, which for growing orchids is important. That number is important. And then also this one has the minor elements as well. So because I'm doing water culture, we can't use the recommended amounts. Even if I was doing bark, I wouldn't use the recommended amounts. But I am doing water culture. And so because your roots are going to be exposed to this fertilizer directly, there's going to be nothing buffering, no bark, no moss, coconut husk, whatever it is that you're using, there's going to be no barrier. We can't use full strength. Like I said, I wouldn't use full strength even if I was doing bark, but you really can't in this situation because you will burn your roots. Now, personally, I've decided that every time I water, they're getting fertilized. And that being said, we're going to use even less now. because we don't want, because they're going to be sitting in the fertilized water, we don't want to overdo it. So this particular orchid food, it says to put 1 teaspoon into 1 gallon of water, and this is an American gallon, so it's 3.78 liters. It says to put 1 teaspoon into that. Again, that's too high. I use 1/8 of a teaspoon. And using 1/8 of a teaspoon in distilled water comes out with a TDS of 63 and a pH of 4.85. Now, to me, that's a little low, especially the pH. The pH now, I feel, is too acidic. Then if you go over to this fertilizer, if you put that 1/8 of a teaspoon into an American gallon of water, you come out with 75 TDS and a pH of 5.2, which the pH is good. That I like. The TDS is still a little low. So what I've come up with is I use distilled water, a gallon of distilled water. I take 2 cups of the distilled water out and put it in another bottle. So I don't waste it. I don't pour it down the sink. And then I add 2 cups of my filtered tap water. And that comes out to a TDS of 105 and a pH of 6.2 to 6.3, depending on the tap water that I'm putting in there. It has to do with, you know, when I put my filter in and how close it is to needing to be replaced. To me, those are the right levels for my circumstance. My circumstance is I am feeding my orchids every time I water them, and I don't want the water too acidic because the roots are sitting in the water. So therefore, this lower number, although it's good with just the distilled, it's still, in my mind, a little too acidic for my method of growing orchids. My method of growing orchids, the roots are in the water all the time. Or semi-culture, it's 2 days. My full water culture, which is technically semi-culture, it's 5 days. So that amount of time, I feel this is too acidic. I feel that this range with the TDS and the pH works for me. Like I said, I do have a TDS meter and I do have a pH meter. Now, these are really cheap. You can get these on Amazon. I think I paid, I'm going to say maybe $13 for this and $11 for this, or vice versa. So that's not really a lot. You don't have to go to this extent. I just was curious about my tap water and if it was the right thing for my orchids. And to me, this was a good investment because I am spending a lot, you know, I'm buying more and more orchids as I'm not killing them and they're happy. I'm kind of branching out and figuring it out as I go. So I thought this was a good investment for me. You don't have to do that. If you have 3 or 4 orchids and that's all you're going to have, this might be overkill for you. And you might just want to, especially if you're doing water culture, just do a very dilute solution. Like this, I label it ready. I mix it up and then I put ready on the top so I know that it's ready to go. And I do keep it in my cabinet under the sink like this. So it's in the dark, it's in a cool place, and I have it already pre-mixed. I don't have the time every time I water to mix up fresh solution. So I just keep a couple of bottles of the ready mix, and then when I'm on watering day, that's what I'm giving to my orchids. So to me, that seems to be what is working for me. It's been a little over 3 months, close to 4 months that I've been doing water culture, and so far, so good. Like I said, my newest orchids do not get fertilized right away. I do let their roots acclimate. This is the second spike on the Firewings Pegasus that is opening. So it's really pretty. I'm sorry, I get distracted by flowers. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. I don't fertilize my orchids as soon as I get them. I just do straight distilled water for 4 weeks. And then once they get acclimated to the water, being in water, then I start to fertilize them. And it seems to be working. Things seem to be going well. And I'm, you know, starting to branch out as far as which orchids that I'm getting. So I hope that this is helpful. If you have any questions or you need me to explain something a little better, please don't hesitate to ask. I hope that this was comprehensive and understandable. I tried to make it as easy to understand as possible, but I do tend to get distracted. So if I missed something or I left something out, please don't hesitate to tell me, and I will, you know, respond and let you know, or I'll do another update if I missed enough stuff that you need me to reiterate. Yeah, so these are my new orchids. That's how I fertilize. And I hope that you guys are enjoying this as much as I am. And I will certainly talk to you soon.